Hello and welcome to Marketing Matters. Today we have our guest speaker, Ivory Harlow, who's going to be talking about pricing your farm products. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to another edition of Marketing Matters. I'm Christie Welch, Direct Food and Agricultural Marketing Specialist with the Ohio State University Extension. And today with me is guest presenter Ivory Harlow. Ivory's a business development specialist with the Center for Cooperatives at Ohio State University. Welcome, Ivory.
Hi.
Today we're going to be talking about pricing your products. We, as folks that provide technical assistance to local food producers here in Ohio, many times get questions about how do I price my product? So, Ivory, what's a good starting point on figuring out how you should price a product that you're producing?
As farmers, especially farmers that are doing direct marketing, I think we fall into danger a lot of looking at what the next guy is charging and then maybe going up a little or going down a little, and that's how we price our products. What we know from a profit standpoint is that's not the best way to do it. We really need to look at what it's costing us to produce those products, get some numbers, do some price research on what the market rates are, and then develop a price strategy. That's how farmers are increasing their profits and pricing their products appropriately.
So can you share a little bit more about figuring out what my cost of production is? I know especially for people that are new or growing a new crop and they don't have a history, can you just start with how do we even go about figuring out what our cost of production might be?
Sure. So if you are already in production and already creating a product, records are going to be your best source of information. If you don't have records to go off of, I would point folks to looking at university enterprise budgets. So the farm management folks at the Ohio State University put out budgets on various crops. Kentucky Crop Diversification has enterprise budgets for specific crops. We're going to talk about some of those resources and point you in that direction later in the broadcast today. I think first maybe walking through an example, if we do have our numbers, of how we can really narrow down to those individual prices and what could be effective.
That sounds great.
Okay. So we thought a good example to walk through would be local maple syrup, being that it is fall and those pancakes look delicious at this time in the morning. So let's talk about, go through the pricing example of a local maple syrup. These numbers are from Ohio State University enterprise budget for a bucket system maple syrup production, small scale, about 250 gallons. So if you're looking at these numbers and wondering where those came from, that's where we got those numbers, and we built this model off of those enterprise budget numbers. So the first thing that we really want to look at are the fixed costs of production. So fixed costs are costs that stay the same regardless of the production level. Things like your equipment to process the maple syrup. What do you have in the sugar house? That equipment, whether you're making 1 gallon of maple syrup or 10 gallons of maple syrup, it's going to cost you the same. Operator labor, such as a manager. Do you have a sugar house manager? What is that operator costing you? If you have taxes or insurance, if you are renting land to put those maple taps on, these are all examples of fixed costs. Also, advertising can be a fixed cost, so whether you're producing 1 gallon or 20 gallons, whatever it is you're advertising, those costs are going to remain constant. The next kind of cost is a variable cost. So variable costs fluctuate with the level of production. If you are hiring some custom help, hourly employees, for example, you might not need that help. If you are just a single operator, you might need more help when it's the busy part of your season. You're probably not producing maple syrup year-round, so those costs are going to fluctuate.
So Ivory, I just have a question because I noticed on the fixed cost we had some labor there, and there on the variable cost we also have labor there. Could you just clarify a little bit the difference between those two labor sources?
Certainly. So some folks will have a manager that's a salaried employee. That employee is a fixed cost. They're going to show up to work at 7 in the morning and stay for their 8 hours of the day, and we're going to pay them regardless. If we have some seasonal help, maybe during bottling season or we're collecting season, that's going to be a variable cost because maybe we're just hiring someone to help us with those large tasks, and the manager is going to be handling the marketing and things later on. So hourly employees would be a variable cost, as where a manager or an individual that's there all the time is a fixed cost.
Great, thank you.
So other variable costs, not for maple syrup obviously, but seed or fertilizer, pesticides, if we're looking at a horticulture system or someone growing produce, are going to be costs that are variable. If you're a livestock producer, feed, so that's going to fluctuate, especially by season, quality, the amount of animals that you are raising, you're going to have fluctuating feed costs. So that's what we consider variable costs. So we've talked about fixed costs, we've talked about variable costs. Total cost is your fixed costs plus your variable costs. Now, I put up an example here of what that would look like in a bucket tap system for maple syrup. The variable costs are listed on top. So we have fuel, is certainly a large cost of maple syrup production. We have utilities, we have labor, there's marketing involved, interest, and our fixed cost there, equipment, that manager that's doing the work, insurance, these are all fixed costs. When we add those two numbers together, the total seasonal cost for producing the maple syrup is $11,417.50. So this is important. It's important to know the total cost of our season. So once we have our production numbers for the season, we can get a good estimate of what each unit is costing us to produce. That's a critical number to know when you're pricing your products. We've got to know what it costs us to make the product so we can make sure that we're pricing our products for profit above that cost.
And so, Ivory, again, just for clarification, if I'm new to maple syrup production and I don't have any of those numbers, I can substitute those enterprise budget numbers at this point, or sit down and figure out what my comparable numbers would be as a starting point.
Absolutely. And when we work with folks on budgeting and business planning, within the business plan, creating the financial records, those university enterprise budgets are a credible source of research-backed information where we can use those numbers.
Great.
So whether you're exploring maple syrup, beef, maybe you're thinking about feeding out some hogs, go and look at the enterprise budgets from land-grant universities and use those to estimate your production costs and also the kind of system that you might be using on your farm. That's going to give you a great idea of what you'll walk away with in your pocket at the end of the year. So we have our total cost for the season, about $11,417.50. The next thing we want to look at is the quantity. So we know what it costs us to produce at a season. In this model, there are 250 gallons of syrup. So it's a small scale production system. The quantity is always the number of units your farm produces, or head if it's livestock. A couple notes. We had that broken down by gallon. There are 4 quarts in a gallon and 2 pints in a quart. I wanted to add those up as we look more at how we're going to market those items and what the costs might be. We might not be selling 1 gallon of maple syrup to an individual family. We might do that by the pint. So we want to look at this at different kinds of bottling structures to get a good idea of what we can charge for a pint versus a gallon, if that makes sense.
Great. And I assume, of course, with that 250 gallons, that again is a number that you're projecting that you will have for that season, because we don't know that up front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've already talked a little bit about this, but a new farmer that's going to lack that yield information, a good place to look at those yields are the USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service. So you can search by subject on there and kind of look at what standard production would be on acres or according to trees in this case. Another resource, the University of Kentucky Center for Crop Diversification. So they also have yield estimates on their website, which is listed here on your screen, and Extension Services farm budgets, which we've already talked about. The Ohio State University has a fantastic farm budgets that you can look at, or enterprise budgets. I would also suggest folks look at Cornell, Purdue, any of the land-grant universities. That's fantastic information to get your budget going. So now that we have our total costs, which are fixed costs plus variable costs, we have the quantity, we can figure out the cost per unit. So this is the magic number. This is what it's going to take to produce the unit cost. So a cost per unit is fixed cost plus variable cost divided by quantity. So when we look at that in terms of gallons, we have our fixed costs, $5,590, plus our variable costs, $5,827.50, divided by that 250 gallon number. That comes up to about $45.67 cost per gallon. So we know that 1 gallon of maple syrup costs us $45.67 to produce at that production level, at those costs.
And Ivory, that 250 gallons, that's actual syrup. That's not the sap that you collected, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So that is the actual syrup that we have to market as a product.
Fantastic.
The cost per unit is, again, what it's going to cost you to produce 1 unit. And it's going to be the amount of money that you need to cover the costs. So if you sell that gallon at $45.67, you walk away with $0 in your pocket. So just to clarify, that's covering your costs. It is not the price that you would want to sell at, because you will have 0 profit at that cost. Next, we talked about quantities by quarts and pints, other quantities that we might sell at. So using the same equation, which is cost per unit equals fixed costs plus variable cost divided by quantity, you'll see the difference in the cost per unit on quarts and pints. Now you might look at those numbers and go, well, the fixed costs stay the same, but the variable costs are a little higher. Why would that be? Because if you are creating quarts instead of bottling by gallons, you're going to have additional supply costs. You might need a few more hours of labor to produce those, because we're having folks bottle more maple syrup. So these costs are going to go up. You'll see the variable cost on the quart is $6,047.50. On the pints, it's just a bit higher, $6,147.50. So there are additional variable costs that's going to make it a little more expensive to produce.
You have to buy more pints to bottle that product as opposed to putting it all in gallons. So that's a great point to point out. It really, again, helps you think about as you're doing your production process, the better records you can keep, the more detailed information you can keep as you move forward. That's just really going to help you improve over time on tracking your costs and your profitability of your products.
So let's look at the unit variable cost next. This is diving a little bit deeper into what we discussed. Bottling more bottles as quarts or pints, the variable cost will increase. So a unit variable cost is the variable cost divided by the quantity. With gallons, we have the variable cost divided by 250 gallons. By quarts, we can create 1,000 quarts, because 1,000 quarts is the same as 250 gallons. That is also equals 2,000 pints. So we can see it's going to cost us $6.05 per quart for a unit variable cost, $3.07 per unit with a pint. When we have that cost, we can factor in a break-even point. So this is called break-even analysis. It sounds a little complicated, but it's really not. Basically, it's your fixed cost divided by the price minus the unit variable cost that we just figured. This is going to help us understand what we need to sell, the amount we need to sell to break even. That way we can price our product so we're doing more than breaking even. It kind of gets back to the idea of we need to know these costs to not only break even, but to be profitable.
And of course, we don't want to lose money in the process too. So it is another great step or exercise to go through to make sure that you are actually tracking your costs, thinking about how much you would like to produce in profit, and make sure that you're not losing money as you're doing this thing you love, producing local foods.
And it's interesting when I work with producers and crunch these numbers, I have never ever met a producer that said, oh, wow, that's better than I thought it'd be. Most people underestimate what it costs them to produce what they're producing. When we really factor in insurance, costs like that we don't necessarily, pour maple syrup on our pancakes and think about, we see that it actually costs us more to produce an item than we would typically think of. So. Back into our break-even point there. When we run these numbers, break-even point is the fixed cost divided by the price minus the unit variable cost. We can see that we're going to break even at 478 gallons. Why is that red? Because we're producing 250 gallons. So we can't break even if we're selling at $35, which is the USDA retail price for selling a gallon of maple syrup. So if you are selling that maple syrup retail by the gallon at the USDA price, you cannot break even. You do not have a profitable product. So as a farmer then, that's a red flag to me that I need to find a way to either A, increase my production so I can do more than break even, or B, find a different way to market that product so that I can not only break even but be profitable. Just to give another example, let's say we decide, well, let's sell by quart instead. So we're going to sell it by quart at that retail price, which is $8.75 per quart. We'll break even at 2,070 quarts if we do it that way because our variable costs are higher. So we don't want to do that either. Again, it's in red because it's not going to work if we're marketing that retail. Our production level isn't high enough. Our costs are too high. Alternatively, if we run those numbers again, and we market 2,000 pints of maple syrup direct to consumers, let's say we're selling at a farmer's market, we're selling those direct to consumers at a farmer's market price of $12 per pint, which is a reasonable price. I've seen it range between $10 and $16 for local maple syrup at the farmer's market. We run the numbers, which is the fixed cost divided by the price minus the unit variable costs. We're going to break even at 626 pints. Well, we're producing 2,000 pints. So that looks like the model that's going to deliver some results. If we look at the revenue from that, it's about $24,000. We know our costs because we factored our costs to be the fixed cost plus the variable costs. We know our costs are about $11,737.50 at that level of production. So we're going to profit $12,262.50 selling direct to consumers at the farmer's market. Versus selling at a retail by the gallon or a retail by the quart price. That's how farmers can use this simple math to understand their cost of production and price their products appropriately.
Well, those are some great examples, Ivory, and I appreciate you running through those. It really does speak to, we try to talk to people about all the time, the marketing channel that you decide to employ for your products or service can have a huge impact on the profitability of your business and your enterprise. And so, again, if people want to dive deeper into the information you've shared to this point, I know we're not done yet, but we do have links to some of the resources going to be posted on our website, and we'll share that at the end as well. So I know already we've done a lot of information and it can be confusing, so I just wanted to make sure that viewers understand where they can find additional information for that. So. Certainly.
So the next question is, if we know what we need to price our products at, we know what our break-even point is, how many we have to sell, then we really got to pinpoint a price. So we need to know what the competition is out there. We need to know what the market is, what people are currently charging, what kind of value these items are priced in the local market. So in order to do that, we need to conduct some price research. The first place to really start is competitors. The USDA maintains local food directories for farm markets, so farm stands, community supported agriculture are also listed. You can visit the local foods directories on the USDA's website, find markets, maybe visit them, do some incognito looking at what the going rates are within your region. That's going to give you a really great idea of regional biases for products. Another place to look is online farmers markets and buying clubs. So this is becoming more of a thing. You don't even have to leave your house. Looking maybe through a local search of online farmers markets and seeing what those prices are selling for online for products similar to yours. Another good place to look is USDA Market News. So the Agricultural Marketing Services publishes wholesale and retail price reports in Market News Online. And you can Google that and search for current prices where you are. The Kentucky Center for Crop Diversification also publishes price reports. Interestingly, they also have produce auctions, farmers markets, they have wholesalers. Now this is within our region, so this is Kentucky, Illinois, Tennessee, Indiana, and Ohio. And last but not least, Market Watch. It's a national hub for price information. They also have some very diverse kind of pricing, for example, fish production, which I thought was very interesting, kind of those hard to find specialty and niche items on that website. So those are some places to look for pricing and to get an idea of what the current market demand is and the current prices on the market to purchase items similar to what you're producing on your farm.
Well, again, Ivory, some just great information that you've shared to this point, and I do think it's important to remember as well, and I'm sure you're certainly aware, that consumers are really becoming more and more interested in the experience, how the product is produced, and so I would say also that there is an art to the pricing, because you have to think about not only what your cost of production is, what your competitors are willing or charging for the similar product, but what are your customers willing to pay for that product as well.
Absolutely. And that's a great, when you're out investigating local markets or maybe visiting cities near you and visiting the farmers markets, that's a great place to be a fly on the wall, see the volume people are purchasing, and also any comments that you might see or hear about what people are purchasing. I've been at farmers markets where people are buying, a peck of apples or something like that, and they're gawking at the price, and I'm thinking, I can't believe the farmer can sell them for that. So opinions vary, but you can see very quickly which stalls are being visited more frequently, what their pricing looks like, and it'll give you a good idea of maybe what the customers in that area are willing to pay. And certainly that changes if you're selling in a large Columbus market versus here in Southern Ohio, a smaller market in a small town. Prices range widely because of what consumers are willing to pay for those items.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know you have some more strategies to share with us. Do you want to go ahead and cover some of those things that we can employ as well?
Sure. So we know what our costs of production. We know what we need to do to break even. We have a general idea of how we're going to sell things. The next step is to determine a price strategy. So how am I going to sell that? You alluded to knowing your customers, the first part of that, and I think that's certainly true. There are 5 pricing strategies to consider. There are actually many more than that, but 5 we're going to talk about here today that seem to work well for farmers. The first is penetration pricing. So penetration pricing is pricing to gain access to a market. It's not a long-term pricing strategy. So a way this might work in a farm, for example, let's say producers of beef are marketing some beef to a restaurant. They really want to get in with that chef. They want to get in the doors. The chef might be purchasing his beef from a large distributor or something like that. And that farmer knows, if I can get my beef there, in that kitchen, I know he's going to see the difference. The customer's going to know the difference. The farmer might offer, I'll match the price of your distributor right now. I just want you to taste my product and get feedback from your customers. And that might be a penetration strategy that would work. The chef gets wonderful feedback and goes, you know what, I can pay a little more for that beef because of the quality. Using this strategy, I would warn folks to be completely transparent. So if a farmer is selling to a restaurant, saying this is an introductory offer would be a great way to be transparent. I just want you to taste this and get the feedback and know that it's worth your money. But this is what my true costs are. This is what you would expect to pay on a long-term basis.
Very good. So I know there's a couple more there that we want to run through here before the end of the broadcast. So what's next?
Sure. So bundle pricing is a great farmers market strategy. So if you, right now, we see peppers galore, tomatoes galore, herbs at the farmers market, maybe creating a salsa bundle or a pasta bundle of items is a great strategy to sell more, a diversity of products in a bundle. That's a strategy that might work for farmers. A loss leader, again, tomatoes big right now. If you can lose some money on tomatoes and get folks to buy okra at your stall, that's a great way to do it. Another idea, if you're selling to institutions, for example, and they're buying for salad bar, you can get your lettuce greens in there, take a loss on those, but you know they're also going to buy your radishes, your onions, different salad bar type items. It's probably worth it for you to take a little bit of loss on your lettuce. Bulk, so a way to move a lot of product during canning season, offer a canning special, something like that. I've sold 5 pounds of tomatoes at a time for those folks that like to can and they just want to pick it up by the box, and you can do that at a discounted rate and move a lot of product before it goes bad. So that's bulk pricing. And last but not least, good, better, and best. I've seen this work very well for apples. So good would be kind of those standard varieties, the Red Delicious, green apples. The next level would be better, so something like a Melrose apple or a Macintosh, a little more exotic, you know, a little more flavor. And then best would be those premiums like Honeycrisp, Ambrosia. The great thing about good, better, and best, if you have a customer that's like, I can't believe they're charging that for Honeycrisp, you can say, well, you know, we have delicious Melrose and they're more affordable. So it allows you to kind of walk customers up or down if you get a reaction.
And you know, Ivory, a lot of what we talked about today with your pricing and your strategies is again going back to what we talked about last time, and that's knowing who your customer is. And so especially with those strategies you just shared, you can serve multiple types of customers with your product by figuring out how to price your product and which strategy you're using to best serve that particular customer that you're looking for. And so we appreciate you sharing the information today. If you want to just kind of recap again, so we have to figure out our cost of production.
The first thing we need to know is what it costs us to produce the item. Next thing we need to know is the quantity we're producing. From that, we can figure out where we're going to break even. And if that looks like we're not going to break even, we know we got to find a different market or price our products differently in order to sell those products at a profit to make it worth our time. Once we have that information, we know what we need to produce, we know how much we can do it for, we're going to do some basic price research, we're going to assess our competitors, we're going to look at the USDA websites, National Statistics Service, Agricultural Marketing Service. We're going to look at prices within our region and within the local area. We might visit some farmers markets, talk to some chefs, do some price research. Doesn't have to be formal. See what the going rates are for those products. And then we're going to develop a strategy to sell our products at an appropriate price that's going to deliver profits to us.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on Marketing Matters.